As a senior manager, do you find that making conversation is actually one of the most difficult things that you have to do in English on a day-to-day basis? If this is you, don't fear. It's a very common struggle, and I'm going to share with you some of my key tips to help build your confidence. Let's crack on. Hello, and welcome to Confident Business English. My name is Anna, and I'm a neurolanguage coach, and this is the podcast. If you're a senior manager, you can already speak English, but you want to build your confidence. If you find the podcast really useful and you want my extra tips I don't include on the podcast, make sure that you sign up to my free Friday newsletter. Link to join in the description box below. So, making conversation. That 5 minutes before the meeting, or just walking into a room full of people at a conference and knowing I'm going to have to try and make conversations with these people, but what if they don't understand me? What if I don't understand them? What if it becomes awkward? What if I'm completely lost? The first thing I want you to know is it's absolutely normal to be nervous about this situation. Many of my clients who are senior managers just like you want to practice this very point. The technical stuff, they're like, that's easy. I know the technical stuff. It's building the relationships. And ultimately, the problem is about connecting with people. If you don't feel confident making conversations, you're not connecting with people. That's the thing that you're missing. But I hope today I will share some things that will help you feel more confident to take that next step. All right, first point on my list, don't reinvent the wheel. If you've been listening to the podcast, you'll know that that's one of my favorite phrases, but it absolutely applies in this situation. We use the same things over and over again. You do not need to come up with new phrases and new questions every single time. Make your life easier. In fact, one thing I recommend is just coming up with a set routine of questions. At a minimum, a 3-step one. Step 1, just say hello. Step 2, the classic, how are you? Step 3, ask a follow-up question with how was. It could be how was your weekend? How was your conference? How was your Christmas? Whatever it is, and then the answer that they give you there, you have to be like a little detective, look for the information, and then ask a follow-up question from that. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Works a charm, and you can just get that little routine on autopilot so you can stop stressing about it. I remember I was working with a client who was going on a really fancy business trip, and they were going to be doing some networking, introducing themselves, and they were feeling really anxious about it. Perhaps you've got a situation like this coming up. They were like, Anna, can't I just get an earpiece that I can put into my ear and then you can tell me what to say? I thought that was funny, and I was like, well, we could maybe look into that. But anyway, the thing I want to recognize is it's absolutely normal to feel nervous about making conversation with people, especially if it's not in your own language, because you are essentially walking into the unknown. So the second point here is you have to accept the unknown. No matter how much you prepare, you cannot guarantee where the conversation is going to go or what the other person will say, and you have to adapt, and that is just a fact of life. You can do the best that you can in the moment, and there are different ways that you can try and control the conversation a bit more, but there's always an element of walking into the unknown. I'm saying that not to frighten you, even though that might sound a little bit scary. It's to free you from this expectation and standard that you put on yourself that everything must go perfectly, smoothly, and swimmingly every single time, because it won't. And I really encourage you to build up your resilience when things don't quite go to plan and fight back against those self-critical tendencies you'll have when things don't go quite right. Those things will kick in and you need to fight against them and say, you know what? It's just a fact of life. Sometimes it goes well, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes people are easy to talk to, sometimes they aren't. Sometimes I'm going to know what people are talking about and sometimes I won't, and that's fine. Next, one of the key ways that you could be more in control of the conversation is to initiate the questions. I've told this story before, but it's just a classic. I had a client who went to a work dinner and everything was going really, really well until she sat down at the table and suddenly she was bombarded with questions by 5 people that were sitting around her. And she said, it was absolutely exhausting. after that. She felt like she'd been done a workout in English questioning. This type of situation can happen, and the way that you can avoid it is to ask the questions or flip it. And by flip it, I mean you pass it over to the other person. Oh, and you? What about you? What about in your company? Try to give yourself a bit of a break from giving all the answers. You can stay more in control if you ask the questions, which is a little bit counterintuitive because you have to put yourself out there, but it allows you to control the topics more and to stick to things that you're more comfortable with. Sticking with the topic of questions is a little trick that you can do to make your life a little bit easier when you're making conversation in English. This is about asking open rather than closed questions. For example, in my routine before that I showed you, I could say, "Hi, how are you? Did you have a good Christmas?" This closed question invites them to have a yes or no answer. So you could say, "Yeah, it was really good, thanks." But if we switch that and instead we ask an open question, for example, "Hi, how are you? How was your Christmas?" Generally, not guaranteed, but you're asking them and inviting them to give a longer, more detailed answer. They might say, "Oh, well, it was really good. I spent some time with my family. It was really nice to get a bit of a break. I really felt like I could disconnect, blah, blah, blah." You're like, "Yeah, perfect. Keep talking." That's great because I don't have to ask the question. And also that it gives you some information. As I said before, you have to be a bit of a detective. It gives you more information that then you can ask a follow-up question about. In summary, open questions make your life a little bit easier because they invite the person to speak for longer, which gives you more time to think about your next question. And again, asking the questions helps you feel more in control of the situation. Moving on, let's talk about expectations. You put a lot of expectations on yourself. I know, you don't need to tell me. One of the things I hear a lot from professionals like you is, "I must have all this advanced vocabulary about any potential small talk topic that could come up." Which, by the way, is an impossible goal, which you probably figured out by now that you give yourself quite a lot of impossible goals because then you never quite reach it. There's always more to do, which has an upside, of course, and a downside. The downside is that you're never happy. It's never enough. What I encourage you to do for your own mental health and sanity is to stop putting this pressure on yourself that you must know every single piece of vocabulary in every single conversation that you could possibly have. If your colleague starts talking about fly fishing in the States or the intricacies of the economy in Brazil, it is unfair for you to put that standard on yourself because it's not that you can't communicate in English, it's just topics that you don't know about, which brings with it vocabulary that's often really niche and really obscure that you probably don't know. So even though you know you're walking into the unknown, you accept that. What can you do to help in this type of situation? In my view, prevention is definitely better than cure. Highly recommend brushing up on any of the common topics that you usually talk about, whether that's work topics, news topics. Maybe you always come back to the same things. Yes, brush up on those things that you know that you're going to talk about. There are plenty of ways to deal with it if you don't understand. You can do the absolute classic, the smile and wave technique, which is basically just like, yep, sounds great, excellent. Yeah, I'm going to laugh and pretend like I understand, but I've got no idea what you're saying. Option number 2, you can just make light of it. Make a joke out of it. Use humor. Don't be afraid to use humor because I find that a lot of my clients are scared to use humor, and I get it because it can be an awkward line to cross. But everybody loves a joke. Everybody likes it when you make light of things. Maybe not everybody, but you can judge that situation, and it's definitely a really good way to handle that. Thirdly, get the possession back. A little bit like in football, ask them that question, get back control of the game. Ask them about something that's easier for you to talk about, move into more familiar territory, just to get a feeling of a bit more control back into the conversation. So even though before, and I know it's an anxiety-inducing thing to make conversation with people that you don't know, especially at a senior level, go into it knowing that you have strategies to deal with it if you don't understand. That should help just calm your mind a little bit. You've got different options. You don't have to crash and burn out there. There are ways to deal with it if you don't understand. Finally, to wrap up, let's talk about the wrap up. I remember a client who would always sail through the conversation. That's a lovely phrase over it, but as you can imagine, sail through, it just means like breeze through. Okay, I used another phrase over it. It just means to go through something really smoothly. Anyway, we'd be doing the exercise. I'm like, yeah, great. And then at the end, it would kind of come to an abrupt finish where they'd be like, okay, bye. And I was like, okay, I think you just need to work a little bit on those sort of endings and wrap-ups, which is a really common thing, actually. It's something that we just overlook. We don't think about how to neatly finish that conversation. In my view, it's a really good idea just to have a few phrases under your belt. We're not going to reinvent the wheel. We're going to use the same ones every time, just to give a nice, smooth finish to the conversation, which is going to help you feel more confident going into the conversation in the first place. I'm going to give you some examples in context. Let's imagine it's a colleague that you already know, you're in a meeting together, you've had your little making conversation. So, shall we start? Doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. Now imagine that you're in a meeting together. You finished the meeting, you had a little chat at the end, and you're like, well, it was great to chat. See you tomorrow. Or see you in the meeting next week, for example. Now picture that you're in the corridor, you've had a conversation, you've built up the courage to go and speak to one of the execs, and now you're like, oh my goodness, what do I say at the end? You can just say, well, and this is that little transition word, that's the one I always use at the end of conversations. Well, it was great to catch up. See you around. Well, it was great to catch up. See you around. Or, if we're in the corridor, remember by that, I mean we're face to face, we're seeing each other. You could say, well, it was great to chat. Let's do it again soon. Or let's put a date in the diary to catch up properly. But even though the little bits of vocabulary change there, we're using the same stem. Well, great to chat, or well, great to talk to you. It's really nothing that is out of your reach, but using it at the right moment at the right time, that's the tricky part. That brings me to the end of the examples then, so there's not really much more else to say other than over to you. Get out there, practice, ask the questions, push yourself, have the courage to take the first step. If you want to build your confidence in this area, you need to take action. Small and manageable steps forward, your confidence will accumulate over time. Hopefully, as you continue to practice and focus on this, it becomes more of an autopilot sort of situation. You're less stressed about it. You're less anxious. You can free yourself up to focus on more important things like, how on earth am I going to convince the board to approve my budget? Or how am I going to sell this really important project? Or just the big picture, think about enjoying the interaction, connecting with people, building relationships with your colleagues from around the world. You can have a great connection with somebody without it being perfect, without having all the vocabulary. It's really, at the end of the day, about connection. It doesn't have to be perfect to do that. All right, that's a wrap. Thank you, as always, for choosing Confident Business English and squeezing in this training into what is, I'm sure, your very busy week. If you want to reach out and get in touch, please feel free to do so. You can find me on LinkedIn if you search for my name, Anna Connolly. It would be great to hear from you. Always love to hear your suggestions and your feedback, so please do get in touch. Have a great rest of your week, and I'll see you same time, same place next week. Bye-bye.